Hello there, and welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis that will help you discover, clarify, and live your purpose.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to What's the Point? I'm your host, Bill Ellis, with another fabulous guest today, and it's really an honor because Mark and I have tried for some time to get our schedules to sync, and they finally do. So please welcome Marc C. Braun.
Great to be here today, Bill, with you.
Yeah, thanks. And it took us a while, but like you said, here we are.
That's right.
So a very brief overview on Mark is the fact that his current focus, he has been president of a very large engineering company in the HVAC field for commercial and industrial. Recently, he left that position intentionally. And probably those that know him could sum up Mark in two areas of his interest and value. And that is, he is always seeking growth, and in particular, courageous growth. And we'll talk a lot about that. But the other thing you'll find out about Mark as we talk is he is just enveloped in essentially boundless gratitude. Gratitude and growth are words that describe Marc Braun. So with that, Mark, let me ask you just to give our listeners a little bit of an overview of what you're doing now, having left Cambridge Air Systems, and then we'll get back to how you got there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was so cool to be there for 13 years. And so what I did, I stepped out in July of last year and started coaching other CEOs and presidents to build courageous growth organizations. So how do you grow both in profit and purpose? And it takes a lot of courage to do that. So I currently coach 12 CEOs and presidents on how to do that. And I get all of their most challenging struggles, the things that hit them, that keep them up at night, and that stall the businesses from growing, either in purpose or profit. So that's what I'm doing today. I actually have a business with my wife doing that. So that's really been fun together to do that.
Well, that takes courage on its own, a lot of people would say. So congratulations on being able to do that successfully. I don't want to overlook Cambridge Air Systems, and I do want to get to that. But part of what is really intriguing about you to me, and I suspect to a lot of our listeners, is when I talk about purpose on this show, I always talk about we all have kind of a central purpose, and then how we apply it changes, it grows, it evolves, but the core purpose is always the same. And for you, that core purpose has been growth. So when you were getting into university, you decided to go into engineering, and you chose chemical engineering because I believe you were told that was the most difficult, challenging part of engineering that you could get into. Tell us about that decision.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I remember being in high school, and the counselors were saying, college is going to be really hard, and my eyes lit up because I loved hard things. And they said, engineering is really hard. And I said, okay, that sounds really cool. And then I looked at the list of engineering, and I was talking through with the counselors, and I was like, well, which one's the hardest? Like, which one's that? And they said, chemical engineering is really the hardest one. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they told me. And so I went into it with just an understanding that I really liked challenges. I really liked them because they let me learn and grow. And so it was tough, but I really enjoyed it. So that was one of my first steps into courageous growth, was like, are you going to go try the hard stuff? Yeah, I'd like to go try the hard stuff. Let's put it on.
And I suspect when you got to the point, Mark, that it was not easy, but when it was somewhat the challenge met, you probably looked for the next challenge and the next area of growth and the next hard thing to do, because you kind of went from engineering and statistics to sales and operations, kind of to general business, and all of that has led into creating the courageous culture at Cambridge Air and now courageous growth in your business. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first milestone on it, I was 23 and I had stepped into my first role as a chemical engineer. And I was about 6 months in, and it was a union shop. Average age of the operators was 28 years of experience, and I was struggling to get anything done. I remember Herb Michael was one of the engineers there that had been around for a long time. He sat me down and he said, "Mark, I really like you." I said, "I like you too, Herb." He said, "You're smart." And I said, "Thanks, I really like that. Thank you so much." And he said, "If you don't change how you interact with the operators, you're going to be gone in 6 months."
Hmm.
And so I was looking at failure like right in the face. I could tell that he actually cared about me. He wanted for me. He wanted me to succeed. And he told me, "You're going to fail if you don't change." And so it was like I started to, I listened. I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for his willingness to speak into a young, cocky little engineer who thought he could pass the tests. And I started to realize that helping them accomplish things, learning about their lives, learning about what they wanted to accomplish, and then helping them do it was actually a beautiful mission, a beautiful work. And so I just fell in love with the people problems. The people challenges were actually much more complex than the technical ones. And so how do you get a team engaged? How do you get them all working on the same things? How do you get them all rowing in the same direction? And so if you think about that idea that the growth of every individual and then the growth of teams pursuing a common mission, a common goal, that has been a lifetime of work. And so, the way I state my purpose, Bill, is to encourage other human beings to be everything they were created to be. I want them to be, I want to play a little tiny part in that. And I want to be close enough relationally that I get to see it. Because it just, it makes my day whenever I see that growth in somebody else.
I think that's fabulous, and I honor that, and frankly share that approach. And it reminds me very much of anyone that listens to What's the Point with Any Consistency knows that I talk a lot about the book The Go-Giver as a go-giver coach, and the thought of giving value and putting other people's interest first, at least considering it before we make our decisions, is exactly what you just described. And how cool is it that a seasoned engineer was able to care enough about a newbie to point out that the chemical engineering is tough enough, but you better get your people skills right.
Yeah.
That's what a gift.
Yeah, he had been through the hard struggles himself, and he was giving forward. He was the go-giver right there in it. It was interesting. When I started to learn how to navigate people, I still was doing it selfishly. So I was still trying to figure it out so that I could gain. At some point in time in that journey of leadership, it shifted. It was, when I had 3 kids, one on the way, a wife and a life, and I'm trying still to navigate. I feel like I'm juggling 6 balls, dropping every third one. I'm like, what is going on? And somehow, men in my life who shared with me and said, "Hey, listen, you can live a different way. You can actually live for others, and you can do that. And you can actually be a giver instead of just giving so that you get." And so that's been 16 years ago, and life has never been the same. When you do it for others, there's no failure. It's just you just keep on trying and keep on trying to do it for them.
And again, so very well said. And at the very heart of the go-giver philosophy is to give without expectation.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will question that, and they say, "Well, I expect a thank you or something," and that's fine. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't expect people to be polite and professional, but if you're doing it to get something in return, that's not giving, that's bartering, that's a trade system,
Yeah.
and oftentimes it leads to manipulation. So, thank you so much for being such a good example of that premise. So, as you went from chemical engineering, tell me more about the journey as you continue to see new opportunities to grow and new challenges. And frankly, get us to where you ended up 16 years ago, having taken over the helm as president of Cambridge Air Systems.
Yeah, so well, after engineering and then leading some teams in engineering, I actually did go into sales and sales leadership, and I wanted to understand that side of the business, and it was interesting how hard it was for people to take a bet on an engineer on switching to sales. And so I ended up saying, I don't care what I get paid. I don't care what I just need to, I want to learn that side of the business. And so I had to go outside of engineering to get the sales experience and then come back inside of companies that had an engineering and technical to come lead engineering sales organizations. And so I just kept on stepping up and saying, I'll try that. And then asking for help, like with Herb and other people in my life, to coach and mentor me on those new tasks. I remember stepping up into the VP of sales role, and I felt stuck and overwhelmed, and I had no idea. I had gotten pretty good at sales after learning from other people, and then whenever I stepped into an executive leadership role, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so that was the first time I hired my first external coach. So I sought, there wasn't anybody in the organization that was above me that could teach me how to do that role.
Mm-hmm.
And so I stepped out and I found an amazing coach here in St. Louis, Dave Hodel. And I remember almost weeping the first time we sat down together because I knew that he had the experience that I needed. And I could feel his willingness to pour back in and give me those things. And so started that relationship and learned and grew through that and was able to then use those skills to coach others on the team and grow. And it was actually 13 years ago that I was asked to step into Cambridge. And so it was the next role, and it was a friend's business that was trying to build a growth-based business and hold on to all the beautiful family values that he had. And I knew how, by that time, I had learned how to grow businesses. And I was like, what would it look like if you could build? He was actually open with his faith, and I was growing in mine. And I was like, what would it look like if you could actually do the purpose and profitable growth at the same time? And so he ended up giving me an enormous amount of freedom and to experiment and learn and grow. And he grew and I grew, and we just had a lot of fun over the last 13 years growing that business in both purpose and profit. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's a little bit of the story.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly helps, and it gives some keen insight because you've mentioned a couple of times, and I just get excited every time I hear you say it, purpose and profit. Because again, from my perspective, if we don't understand our purpose, the profit's not going to happen. And if we do, we certainly have a much better chance of getting the profit. So speaking of growing business, during your tenure at Cambridge, revenue grew 4 times and profit grew 10 times?
Yeah, so we experienced enormous growth, and both on the profit side, but what was really fun was the cultural side. Over 5,000 people over that time came to Cambridge just to see the culture. They came not just to see the products, to see what was happening with the people. There's 175 folks there, and they were growing, and they were growing. They were practicing gratitude, back to your statement of gratitude. They were practicing gratitude on a daily basis. They were improving the systems. They were learning and growing, and it was blowing my mind, John's mind, the owner and chairman and CEO, and everybody else's. And so people were coming to see that culture, and I was, in awe of what could be done. I want to go back to the purpose and profit for a minute. Most of the people in my life yell at each other back and forth. They yell that there should be profitable businesses, or they yell that businesses should be purposeful. And the power, the beauty in almost everything I've ever seen is there's the 3 letters between that, the and. That's the hard part. It's how do you have the and between the parties? The left and right are always yelling at each other, and how do you get both and the things that both parties want done? That's where it becomes challenging. That's where I believe it takes a miracle. That's where I get to have fun, thinking about what could happen, and leading and growing and coaching. How do you get the and in there?
Well, if you can, give us an example, real or hypothetical, of how that might work, because everyone listening wants to know.
Yeah. Well,
as do I.
Yeah. I mean, I just think about, one of the local businesses that has been a beautiful, purpose-filled business, Woodard Restoration and Cleaning here in town.
Mm-hmm.
multi-generational family business, and you watch how they have built their culture. Justin Woodard is the third generation owner and CEO, and I've been sitting with him over the last 7 years. We met weekly for most of that time, and just watching him pour in the purpose side of the business. And you basically have a culture where every single person's engaged and they want good things for each other. And so the question is, what do you do about profits whenever you've got so much focus on purpose? And it's so beautiful. And the question is really, what does his leadership look like when he actually introduces the understanding of how business works to the teams, and they can actually look at the financials together and have transparency across the board and actually reflect, like, when we do good business, it actually leads to profitable growth. And we get to reinvest in that. And so today I get the pleasure of coaching him, and we get to look at both sides, the parts that are running incredibly well and the parts that need tweaking and need refinement. And in his leadership, how does he step up into those spaces? He's a young leader, and so he gets to grow in that area. That's an example of growing in both profit and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
He was strong in purpose. There's others that are really strong in profit and really need to focus and understand how to get their purpose, their culture more purposeful. And so they focus on the people systems and how do you care well for the folks, and how do you get daily habits in where that practice of appreciation can happen, and where you can get daily examples. Just one example there. About 11 years ago at Cambridge, we started sharing at each of our group meetings and individual meetings. We started what's called a personal professional check-in. And we allowed a formula for being able to bring both the personal in as well as the professional, which is sometimes the personal, sometimes it's hard to get those in a productive way. And so that one is an example of increasing purpose. And you're not focused on only the financials. You actually want to know what's going on with their lives. Sometimes I would come in and the executives would share with me those personal professional check-ins, and I would have an agenda on my plate that was mainly profit driven. I would be thinking about the profitability of the business, and I would be driving towards profitable growth. And in that personal professional check-in, things would come up that were deep. And one time, every single person around the room had massive things going on in their personal lives. And so I was like, how would I lead this group if I didn't know those things? How would I have any chance of leading this team if I didn't know those things? And so that's an example of purpose building into the fabric of the business. And they're complementary, as you know. But it's the beauty of the and that really makes it fun, and it makes it self-sustaining.
That's so true, and so very well said. The part of it is just the awareness, as you pointed out, that both are necessary and both are complementary if they're pursued in that manner. They are not. There's nothing mutually exclusive about the concept of profit and purpose, and as a matter of fact, it's the sum is greater than the total of the parts, right?
Yeah, you can do it two different ways. You can either or, which is the way I think many people do it. You can do them simultaneously but separate. And what I hear you talking about, and what I love to see, is when they're actually together. They're like lockstep, and they're all engines forward on both throttles, purpose and profit.
Yeah, and I believe, and your example just reinforces what I've believed all these years, that is not just an effective way, but it's the best way to achieve success in business, which to me has to involve a satisfied, grateful, motivated workforce. And that's where purpose comes into play as well. So when we in business are able to integrate our core values with a strong business strategy that leads to profit, we're going to be in the best position, don't you think?
I do. And for some reason, because I hang around with people like you who believe that so strongly, it almost sounds like an echo chamber. Like we all know that so well now, but there's many folks who that is still, they're working so hard on the profit side of the business. They're trying so hard to figure that out that they think they listen to the purpose side and they're like, okay, do I have to add that? Like, do I have to do something more? And it actually gets easier when you integrate those two things. And so, yeah, I 100% agree with you.
What interests me and often brings a smile to my face is when I have this discussion with people that aren't as prone to embrace it, certainly as you are, is when people say, well, those are the soft skills, the people skills, the soft skills. And I just chuckle because bringing purpose and nurturing the purpose of employees to get the best out of them because you're giving them the best is not a soft skill.
It's the hardest work
Tell
I've
us
ever
about
done.
your journey there.
It's the hardest work I've ever done. I mean, I think about,
Yeah.
if you just think about like one skill, empathy, the ability to actually feel and empathize with the feelings of another human being. I remember, I think I started my journey at a -3 out of 10. That was my self-rating. I was just not good at it. I didn't know what it
Mhm.
was, and so I decided to work on that one because I got feedback that one was needed. And I'm like, okay, how do I do this? And I've seen people that are gifted at it, that are naturally gifted at it. I'm like, wow, they're really good at it. And for me, it was just really hard. I think the key is like not everything is hard in the same way for everybody. My wife is just incredible at empathy. She's like
Mhm.
really, really gifted at it, and I wasn't. So I learned from her. It was hard for me. I had to work
Mhm.
I had to work harder to gain empathy than I did to pass the statistics chemical engineering tests.
Mhm.
And so that's the point. We all have different gifts and talents. I think the soft skills is like if that's easy skills, boy, they sure weren't easy for me. Um,
And I would venture to say, Mark, that they're not easy skills, even for someone like your wife, who is intuitively empathetic, because it's still something that takes a lot of, um, I would say, caution and a lot of experience to get to that, because it can be very fragile. And as you well know, and everyone listening knows, we're all different, and so we can't. It's not a cookie cutter like it is in solving a math equation.
yeah,
So it's different.
if you think about how we learn, so I've used this analogy before. When I drop a rubber ball, a bouncing ball, it comes right back up to me. If I do it 100 times and I do it at the same height, it comes up basically the same height. And so I
Hmm.
learn pretty quickly, drop rubber ball, it bounces back up. In people, like I'll talk to them. I'll say, "Hey, this would be a good idea." And sometimes they come back with good yes, and sometimes they come back with I said the same thing, and they yell at me, and sometimes they frown, and sometimes
Hmm.
they smile, and the variables that happen are just
Yeah.
so relational work is never. Yeah, you're right. It's never easy. It's never simple compared to science or something that would be easier or simpler because it always happens the same. And so our learning system, we have to use different skills. We have to listen more. We have to intuit easy. We have to really pay attention.
I love that analogy with the ball and saying the exact same thing to a different person, or even the same person on a different day, depending on what their experience has been that day, is going to give something different. And maybe I'm just having this realization. I'd love to hear what you think. Maybe that's what people mean by soft skills. So to me, statistics and math and a lot of the those types of challenges are very hard and firm. If you add this to this, it gives you that. And, there are different rules in math, and that, it's very hard and fast.
Yeah.
So maybe soft skills mean that it's not always the same result doing the same action.
Yeah, I think that's well. If soft means that, it definitely is true with relationships. I think about how many formulas I've learned relationally, and they've all added to each other, and they are helpful to break down some of the communication styles and some of the personality methods, and strength finders and Myers-Briggs and all of those inputs. They help you start to understand the complex human nature in front of you. I think about the part that I love is the complexity is so beautiful, and so every individual is created uniquely. And so whenever I'm there, if I can stay curious about what it is that they're uniquely designed as, what are they uniquely built for, what are their unique gifts, what are their unique strengths, what is the weaknesses that are there alongside that, what does that look like, and just stay curious. I don't have to have the answers. I don't have to know exactly how they're going to bounce back. I can actually just stay curious and navigate with them and learn and grow together.
Yeah. Well, as we talk further, I think I have to add a third attribute, not just your boundless gratitude and your commitment to courageous growth, but your commitment to being a seeker, to learning, to being open. Because you talked about going from the chemical engineering side into sales and operations and then leadership, and you talked about getting a coach, which I recommend everyone do. If they have the need, the best athletes in the world have coaches. Why shouldn't we?
Yeah.
But the other thing that I don't want to leave unsaid is your voracious reading and trying to learn. So tell us about that as well, because that's something else that really expanded your knowledge base.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe in learning and ongoing learning, and reading is one of those places that I do a lot of. I happen to use Audible as a reading method for me because it's better fit for my learning style. But I love that technology because then I can actually read more and learn more from that. I think writing for me and reading, there's something beautiful whenever human beings take the time to write down and codify, what they're thinking. When we only verbally process, when we don't actually write it down, we leave room for flexibility always. There's always room for change and flow. And when we make a decision to say, I actually have something to say and it's important enough to write it down, I find that there's beauty in that for the writer and then for the reader. And so I really enjoy reading for that purpose as well. It's just to see where that person was at that time and how did they simplify complex systems into a framework of some kind that they're actually putting in front of me. I also like reading because you can actually share it with other people. This book right here, this one was shared, 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And so now whenever I'm with somebody and I go, oh boy, I think they would really enjoy it, I don't have to talk with them about the 360 pages. I can actually gift it to them and then they can have a shared experience. So I really like books for that purpose as well. So that's a little bit about the book reading.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you are so willing to gift books that are meaningful to you. And what that really does is, because I do the same thing with some books, but it really, to me, demonstrates our commitment that we really believe this.
Yeah.
It's not just lip service.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. When I find a book, I have to grab one more for you. This one right here is called The Fox, the Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And when I read it, I cried the first time I read it. It was so beautiful. And I said, I want every single human being that I know to read this. And so I read it the next time and I cried. I was like, holy cow, like this thing is really touching my soul. And so I just bought 15 copies. And then I'm like, okay, who can I give these to? Because I want them to have that experience and I want to share that human experience. And so, yeah, that's the kind of thing and the reason I do that is because the mentors and coaches in my life did that for me. They gave me freely. They didn't ask for like give me another book in exchange. They said, here's something from me to you, and I would love to share it with you. And so I just do that because I was modeled for me, and then I loved it. It felt so good whenever I got that, and so I keep on doing it forward. And that's how life works. We just learn from people and then copy that and do it forward and pay it forward.
So true. I just want to go back real quickly to on the topic of coaches because it's certainly relative to you and your experience from being coached, but also in the experience that you give as a coach.
Yeah.
You talked about the coach that you had hired, and I'm sorry, I didn't catch his name. Daniel?
Dave Hodel was
David.
the first coach that I hired 20 years
Okay.
ago. Yeah.
So what you said was he knew everything that you were looking to understand, but here's what's key. He knew how to communicate that to you in a way that you could receive it.
Mm. Oh my.
And that's what makes a good coach a good coach. And that's why there are different coaches because he was perfect for you and may not have been for other people. I don't, not to say that denigrating, but it's just fact.
Right.
But it's really important to be able to communicate effectively. And that's part of what you were able to do, I believe, at Cambridge by being able to communicate the principles of the purpose and the principles of empathy and the principles of gratitude in such a way that all the employees seem to have embraced it. And look at the yield.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about you said so many great things there. I think the first one you said was that not every coach is the same and not every coach is for you. And I get asked the question of a lot about how do you select one? If I wanted one, how do I select one? And for me, there's three things. The first criteria is they should be somebody other than you, and that's a pretty big group. There's 7 billion people out there. The reason they should be other than you is we actually need other human beings. We're designed to have other human beings speaking into our life, and when we name somebody that's not us and say, "Would you be my coach?" That's a big deal. So they should not be you. The second thing is they should care about your growth more than their own. They should be already at a point in time in their life where they're giving for the purpose of giving, not getting. They should already have converted to that model that you talked about, like on the second half of life where they're giving because they actually believe that giving is part of what they want that for you. And so that's a smaller group, but there's still a lot of people in people's lives that care so deeply about them that they would just give it, not for something in exchange. They would just do it because they love them. They want that for them. And they don't, and so they just find somebody that cares about your growth. And the third thing is they should have experiences that are relevant to what you're trying to accomplish. And so if you're going to try to go win the Masters in golf, you should probably find somebody that actually has some experience in that field. And so that's the only one that gets to a kind of a small group of people. So if you're trying to grow a business in purpose and profit, you should find somebody that's not you, that cares about you, and that has experiences of growing in purpose and profit, that they can share those experiences, those common experiences of like, this is what it looks like. And so those are the three things that for me are required. They should have some experience being coached themselves, because coachability is the only way we learn what coaching looks like.
Right.
And so that's it.
I agree with everything you said. Sorry if I interrupted you.
Go
My
ahead.
apologies. I just want to bring some clarity to the second point that you made, where it should be someone that's willing to give. And I just want to make sure people listening understand that doesn't mean coaching should be free.
Not at all.
It's not a gift. It is someone that's willing to give everything they have in the most effective way with your betterment in mind, and doing it for a fair price. Because being a go-giver doesn't mean to be giving things away per se. It's about giving value, which is giving more in value than we take in payment. And I just want to clarify, that's the type of giving that you're referencing and that I believe in as well.
Yeah, it is. And it's a great clarification. I've paid every coach that I've had. And what I mean by that is that they cared about me. They really wanted to see me grow. They would tell me that they're not the right coach for me if they're not the right coach for me.
Right.
They would tell me to go get another coach if I needed another coach. And that's what I mean by they're ready to give. They're ready. They know that your growth is really important, and they don't want to waste your time on that.
Exactly. And for someone to say, I provide a service, but I'm not the best match for what you need, go check this person, to me is some of the greatest value anyone can give.
Definitely.
Let me touch quickly on something else that we have in common, because I know it's a very integral part of both of our lives, and that is we are both living in the blessing of recovery, recovery from abusing alcohol. What have you learned there? It just strikes me. Well, I'll just say, what have you learned there?
Yeah, so my wife and I have 4 kids, and one of our kids actually came back from Iraq struggling with depression and addiction.
Mhm.
And so that was the first time I walked into the recovery rooms. The recovery rooms are places where they knew what to do to help him get better and to heal and to recover. What I saw in those recovery rooms was this group of human beings that were all working to help each other. They were working. It was the most beautiful place that I had seen human love demonstrated, and systematic capabilities to recover and to heal from mental challenges, whatever those are, whatever abuse had been suffered, whatever addiction was there. And
Mhm.
so we lost Ryan 11 years ago. He actually didn't make it through. But I have stayed in the recovery system that entire time because what I saw was just unbelievable. And I
Mhm.
needed it just like Ryan needed it. And I believe everyone needs it. I believe everyone needs to know the principles of what is taught inside of those rooms. And so that's been a beautiful learning for me. It did end up making me make decisions that I would never have made before. I eliminated things like alcohol from my life because I just didn't want them in my life anymore. It wasn't
Mhm.
helpful to me to help myself or everybody else in what I wanted to do in life. And I still learn from that system. I still learn some of the most amazing
Mhm.
lessons. If you go to Cambridge, you'll see what I believe to be one of the most beautiful cultures for recovering from whatever the challenges that life leads to. And so I believe you can actually integrate those principles that are inside the rooms into business to be able to show people a better way to live, one where they are free and joyous and happy and grateful and all those things. And so there's a lot there. That's about a 3-minute version of it. What other questions do you have, Bill, for that side?
Well, again, I did want to put that out there because there is so much value to that, and it's certainly helpful to folks like me and people who I interact with. And it's the kind of thing that to me is uh, not just continuous growth, but also courageous growth, which gets us right back to the premise of your current coaching and what you started, what you kind of ignited throughout your entire career when that starting, I believe, when that first engineer said, "Hey, boy, if you want to stay here, you better wake up
Yeah,
and do some things differently."
yeah.
So, talk to me a little bit more. Share with all of the listeners, Mark. Marc Braun is my guest today, more about courageous growth. I know that you are working, you talked about writing things down. I know that you're working on writing things down to make courageous growth into a book. And when it's ready to go, I'll be one of the first people to purchase it. I'll make that
We'll
commitment
send
right
you the
now. And
copy.
I suspect it'll be one of those books that I buy 15 copies to give to people as I tell them this will help you. But share with us your thoughts on that and how it's progressing and how people can benefit from it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. The first thing I'll just do is share a little bit about courage. One of the things I learned partially through that work with Ryan was that I struggled with admitting when I was afraid. I struggled with admitting fear. And so I might feel afraid of something and not be able to share that or not even be able to tell anybody about that. And I found that that was really something I wanted to be able to practice and be able to name whenever I was afraid. I found that what happened was when I would name it, admit that I was afraid, and then step out of my comfort zone and actually step out intentionally and go take action, even though I was afraid, that was the definition of courage. And I was like, whoa, cool. Like if I admit that I'm
Yeah.
afraid and actually intentionally step out and learn and grow, that's courage. Maya
Hmm.
Angelou says that courage is the most important virtue of all virtues. It's the one that allows us to practice all the others. And in my life, I'd been trying to figure out how to practice the other ones. And when I was trying that, that was courage. When I was trying to figure out how to be a better husband, a better father, a better son, a better leader, I was actually practicing courage. And when you're learning and growing, it's always growing outside of the current self, your current comfort zone, your current abilities, your current skill sets. When Herb Michael said, you need to figure out how to have genuine care about these operators, union operators, I was like, I don't know how to do that. Like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And so I was afraid. He breathed courage into a young man and said, you can do it. Go do it. Here's a class. He gave me 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and sent me to the class. And I was like, develop a genuine interest in other people. Maybe I can do this. I started to get a little bit of courage to try things that I was uncomfortable with because of other people speaking into my life. And that's just repeated over and over and over and over in my life. So that's a little bit about the courageous growth. I believe I've drawn this circle for people in my life probably 1,000 times now. They're trying to do something like, let's say they're trying to lead a meeting for the first time. And at Cambridge, we had many people who we asked to step up and lead meetings. And they said, I will never lead a meeting. I said, okay, how far outside of your comfort zone is it? So I would draw a comfort zone for them, and they would put a dot off the board. They would be like, I'm never going to do it. I said, okay, no problem, no problem. Is there anything closer to your comfort zone that you'd be willing to try? And they said, well, if you led it with me, I would do it. I go, okay. Are you comfortable with that? They said, no, I'm not comfortable with it, but I'm willing to do it. I said, okay, let's do that. And so we would just grow the comfort zone a little bit at a time. And today there's people out there that are leading meetings that said they would never do it because of them courageously stepping out of their comfort zone and growing. So that's what courageous growth is. And I love seeing it.
And I love hearing the stories of how you help to coach it and create it and the people that benefit from that. Now I'm going to ask you, if you will, reach behind you and grab that plaque on your credenza there and share that, both the visual with those watching on YouTube and also the verbal, because I absolutely love that.
Yeah, this is a plaque that says, it's a porcelain plaque or a ceramic plaque, and it says, leap and the net will appear. And, I think about faith, that the net will appear. When I step out of my comfort zone, that I won't die from it, that I'll actually continue to learn and grow. And this was given to me by my sister, Rachel. I've got 5 sisters, and Rachel gave it to me when I was stepping out of my comfort zone into a new role, and she knew that I was afraid, and she said, just leap and the net will appear. There's people in my life all over the place. She happens to be one of them that keeps on encouraging me. And those people, have a special place in my heart. I keep it like that on my back because I'm like, I just need to know that because I'm still not done. I've got a comfort zone that's this big, and I keep on trying to do things outside of it. And I'm not going to stop doing that for the rest of my life. So I need that reminder that the net will appear. Just leap.
Well, I think that's beautiful. You also mentioned faith, and I believe you share the belief that fear and faith can't coexist. So if we get to the point of having faith that the net will appear without having to know exactly how or when, that helps lead us to make those courageous moves. And the other thing about the comfort zone is we can push our comfort zone and step outside of it and stretch it. And it may not say stretch that far, but it's still going to be a little bit further than it was. So I encourage everyone listening to follow Marc's advice and step outside your comfort zone. And if it's not something that's on your bucket list or public speaking, or if there's something you're really afraid of, find something closer in, but step out of your comfort zone. I guarantee you'll learn from that. So Marc, again, thank you so much for your time and your experience. But before you go, when we put all this together, the podcast has a name for a reason. And as you put all this together and you go through life and your goal of helping people to grow in their value, what's the point?
Yeah, what's the point? Yeah. Well, life is it's really too beautiful and too short to stay stuck. And so if you are stuck, if you're feeling overwhelmed, admit it. Find somebody that can coach and mentor you and help you get unstuck. Ask for help. And then when you get unstuck, whenever you start to grow and learn, step back and help somebody else. Encourage them to grow with the new knowledge that you have, the new skills that you have. And that makes a life worth living. It's just a beautiful life. And I do that one day at a time, and I think that's the point.
Very well said, very succinct yet powerful, which is exactly what I would expect from you, my friend. Thank you for being so persistent and agreeable to find our schedules when they might match. I very much appreciate your time today. For everyone and anyone that wants to get in touch with Marc directly, all of his contact information, as always, will be in the show notes. So if you're looking for some courageous growth coaching and advice and insights, absolutely contact Marc Braun. And again, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it so much, my friend.
Thank you, Bill. A pleasure.
Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise you'll gain value in every one. Rating and reviewing makes us more discoverable and helps others find out what's the point. And if you'd like to know more about Bill Ellis or contact him, please visit his website, www.brandingpillars.com. See you next time.